Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 19th of December, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. In fact, welcome to this Christmas special of UK Column News, our usual end of the year roundup and a look towards 2026. So we have myself, Mike Robinson, Brian Gerrish, Partick Henningsen in the studio. Welcome both.
It's a pleasure. It's a very warm studio today.
It is a very warm studio today. It's a pretty
Merry Christmas all.
Yes, indeed. And by video link, well, we have Charles Malet, we have Diane Rasmussen, we have Sandi Adams, we have Ben Rubin, and we have Mark Anderson. So welcome, everyone. And well, let's see, what are we going to get kicked off with today? Well, I'm going to start. And well, this year for me, I think one of the biggest stories, Patrick and Brian and everybody, was the use of the Terrorism Act by the British state to try to intimidate just about anybody that they could. And so to sort of illustrate this, I want to draw your attention to this document that was released yesterday or the day before. It's entitled State Threats Legislation in 2024. This is the report of the Independent Reviewer of State Threats Legislation on the operation of Parts 1 and 2 of the National Security Act 2023 and Schedule 3 to the Counter-Terrorism and Border Security Act 2019. And it's by Jonathan Hall, KC, who's the Independent Reviewer of State Threats Legislation. Now, to be clear about this, he is reviewing the situation with respect to British legislation in these areas, commenting on it, and in some ways highlighting the dangers of it. So let's just run through some of what he says here. Despite the title being 2024, this was just published in the last couple of days. So what he says in the introductions is that this is an independent review in the United Kingdom's legislative response to the malign activities of foreign states below the threshold of armed conflict. So in that sense, he's sort of reiterating the government narrative on this. But what you'll see, if you see any typos in this, by the way, these are in the document. They're not me. So just to be clear about this, it was full of typographical errors, and that is not the best. He goes on to say, the United Kingdom has tooled up against these state threats by granting major new powers to the authorities, updating old spy laws, and creating genuinely novel criminal offences such as foreign interference, sabotage, theft of trade secrets, and assisting a foreign intelligence service. He says some of the powers and offences extend well into the zone of political activity, journalism, protest, and day-to-day human activity. However useful, they must be tested against misuse and overreach. So let's just have a look and see what he is highlighting here. He said, I've identified the following areas which require particular vigilance as these laws are deployed. First of all, the power to stop and detain travellers who are unwittingly caught up in state threat activity at the UK border, and this is something we've seen quite a lot of this year in particular. The foreign power condition, which does not require any contact with a foreign power. So you can be accused of working with a foreign power, having had no contact with that. Innocent interactions with foreign intelligence services, the ability of police to require individuals to leave areas adjacent to prohibited places, including in protest cases, and the potential impact of the foreign interference offence on foreign policy work by think tanks and journalists. And he goes on to highlight a particular area of this, and that is hostile state activity. And he says that since hostile activity does not require any knowledge or tasking by a foreign state, the phenomenon of double ignorance could arise. A person may be engaged in hostile activity if they do something which, unknown to them, threatens national security and which is in the interests of another state, also entirely in the dark. So, Charles, I'd like to get your thoughts on this so far, because we're talking about a situation where the legislation is already in place, and he's highlighting how it could be used in the future. And he's already talking about the fact that you don't need to have had any contact with any kind of foreign state to effectively be accused of collaborating with a foreign state, which would be a national security issue, and ending up on the receiving end of terrorism legislation and so on. This is quite an incredible situation.
It is. I would say, though, from a legislation point of view and the way that the statute has been going in the last few years, this is actually consistent with that, in that there is a marked shift away from what one might describe as being the correct criteria that are required for an offence to be commissioned. And we now have an inversion of that, where a lot of people are now able to, in effect, create the conditions for conviction when there may not have been any intent by the so-called perpetrator. And we've seen that a lot with knife crime, for example, and respect orders, knife crime, violence reduction orders, and all those sort of things, where you don't actually need to have committed the criminal offence in order to find yourself on the wrong side of the law. The same thing with the public spaces protection orders and what we've seen with the so-called buffer zones around abortions. So in that respect, I think it is entirely consistent, and therefore disturbingly consistent. And the fact that it is able to get this far without being checked by anybody who's apparently sort of reading into this, I think puts us in an extraordinary place. And also, there isn't a public outcry. People have got more and more used to the state conducting activities of this sort without there really being any particular thought process that goes into it, whether or not it's actually appropriate. Because, of course, we're all supposed to be convinced that this is for our safety.
Yeah, indeed. Well, look, let's just briefly, I'll get your comments in a second. I just want to run through a couple of examples of what hostile activity might be. And one of these I'm particularly interested in your thoughts on, Patrick, because if we bring this on screen here, what he said, one example, the first example he gives, is a developer of an app whose selling point is end-to-end encryption, which would make it more difficult for UK security and intelligence agencies to monitor communications. And, he is talking about the likes of WhatsApp and Signal here. Okay, so this is pretty serious stuff, and then he goes on to say, and this is what I'm really keen to get your thoughts on, Pat. A journalist carrying information that's personally embarrassing to the Prime Minister on the eve of an important treaty negotiation affecting UK security interests. He's highlighting this as a potential application of this legislation.
That looks like a specific example that he's citing there, but not explicitly naming. It's totally arbitrary. So they could, if the state determines that if you agree with the position of a foreign state, i.e. Russia, or you've come to that conclusion. Let's say I'm an author doing research on a book, and I find out based on factual research that this is the case in Donbass. And if I then publish that and the government deems that to somehow be helping a foreign state because I'm agreeing with some kind of an assessment, they make a totally arbitrary determination that this is somehow aiding and abetting an enemy of the state. Therefore, I am in breach of this new, what's it called, state threat legislation, which is just another extension of the Terrorism Act in another name. Speech control is what it comes down to. So you can't work, you can't research, if you're a historian, you can't go and find out what the real truth is. If you're a journalist, you can't report on the truth because you might fall foul of the state threats legislation. This is 120% Orwellian. Right to the core. That's the best way to describe it.
And the chances are, if it becomes very serious, you end up in court with no jury. You're simply in front of the state judge.
Absolutely. So let's just very quickly look at even more draconian aspect of this. Access to digital evidence. So he's talking about Schedule 3 here of the Terrorism Act, I think, and access to digital evidence is likely to remain, as with Schedule 7, a major benefit to investigators. Schedule 3 provides powers of extra intrusion into confidential material, meaning confidential journalistic material, legally privileged material, confidential health records, and human tissue, DNA. In other words, he says these powers of intrusion may only be exercised with permission of the Investigatory Powers Commissioner, who you may have just seen popping up over his right shoulder there, unless urgency provisions are in play. So that there is the possibility of urgency provisions being brought in which case they just do it no matter what the Investigatory Powers Commissioner thinks. And then he just made 3 recommendations in this report. The first one is he recommends that the Secretary of State identifies a date before or a time period within which official statistics on the use of state threat powers should be published. And he recommends that public guidance on peaceful protests should be drawn up for police officers exercising their powers under Section 6 of the National Security Act 2023. And he recommends that Section 51(1)(a) of the Police Reform Act 2002, which presently refers to independent custody visits and the provision of reports to the policing authority and to the independent reviewer in terrorism cases, should be amended to refer to arrests in National Security Act 2023 cases. And those are his only recommendations.
Mike, protests? What kind of protests? Anti-war protests,
right?
In violation of the National Security Act. That's what this is exactly pointing to. And I might ask, what about foreign interference? How about a foreign government or foreign lobby meddling in the British democratic system and parliamentary system to purge one of the main, or Her Majesty's loyal opposition at the time, the Labour Party, of its leadership and half its membership based on an anti-Semitic a campaign, which was exposed as being completely fraudulent. What about that level of foreign interference? Does that concern the British state at all? Right. I would think it would.
Right. And so from the point of view of a look into 2026, I'm not going to say anything other than I'm going to suggest we're going to see much more use of this type of legislation, and with an absolutely chilling effect on freedom of speech and so on. But Charles, let's move to you then, and related topic, I suppose, because we're starting with the foreign influence registration scheme.
We are under the banner of the much manipulated banner, let's say, of national security. And really what I want to go through is the progression that we've seen across 2025, effectively building the narrative. And I'll explain where it is that we get to, in fact, just this week, but really to demonstrate how this idea that national security is something that we do something about, not just via legislation, but also via policy, and how exactly that manifests. Now, we've just heard reference to the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme. At the time, that was launched back in April by Dan Jarvis. Iran was the bogeyman at that point. But of course, it's easily to manipulate the situation and suggest to people that there are foreigners coming here who are up to no good. The National Risk Register came out earlier in the year. Again, getting people used to the idea that there is an emergency coming and that we have many things that we can consider with regard to that. And emergency is a theme the government have actually been running a campaign on. You may remember the emergency alerts thing that started last year, and there's now a campaign to get prepared for emergencies, very much seeding the minds, this thing in the minds of people that there is going to be an emergency, that they were going to have national drills to prepare for it, and all of that sort of thing. So we're building a sort of general background to this, and then the government have weighed in with several documents about what they're going to do. What's the strategic response to this? And in fact, what we should really be considering is the strategic response to this is one of a communications consideration, a communications bombardment, which takes us to a very specific place. We had the Government Resilience Action Plan, and this again is to divert attention from the way in which infrastructure is so badly managed, the way that the pursuit of net zero and so many other things, as well as the enormous increase in AI, can have attention drawn away from it. And then in the summer, we had the twin publications of the Strategic Defence Review and the National Security Strategy. Now, this introduced this concept of a whole of society response. And that whole of society response was predicated on an existential threat specifically from Russia. And that has been the direction of travel ever since. Now, in effectively a tacit admission that we do not have the military might, should the situation arise, to enter into a conflict with Russia. We've got the UK's Modern Industrial Strategy just published last month, which effectively gives carte blanche to the governments to engage with corporations and indeed begin to fight effectively on a different plane. So this is the defence dividend playing out. This is power and money going to the corporations rather than to military entities. And I can say that I did actually have a conversation face-to-face with a senior member of the NATO command structure just this week, and he confirmed absolutely that this is the case. Now, running in the background, of course, we have the conscription narrative, and it was back in March that the government put out a document one might have thought completely unnecessarily, and yet look where we are in December, when just this week we had the Secret Intelligence Service and the Ministry of Defence telling us that, forget all the rest, Russia is the problem. We are absolutely in mortal peril from Russia, and that is the message that has been built upon throughout the course of this year with the specific intent of ensuring that we have it firmly fixed in our minds that any problem that occurs from hereafter, and I'm really referring to the possibility of a false flag, absolutely can be pinned on Russia, which puts us into an emergency situation, and from there we will get a response. Now, I would just like to note that I mentioned this on Wednesday, that the Russian embassy in London has put out a message about this. It's very much aware of what it describes as an anti-Russian information campaign in the United Kingdom. And I think it's just worth noting here, obviously I don't have a crystal ball, I can't see what's going to happen, but the Russian embassy does say the British media persist in stoking anti-Russian hysteria. I'd say not just the British media, painting a picture of an all-encompassing threat to the UK allegedly emanating from Russia. Russia has no plans, intentions or reasons for entering into an armed confrontation with the UK. And yet, even the Dawn Sturgis report of the last couple of weeks has absolutely been manipulated into that same place. And I think we end up with a question, which is, if Russia is so dangerous and so intent on doing us harm, and we are admitting through all these strategic documents that we are not in a place to defend ourselves with any degree of significance, why is it that Russia hasn't actually made a move? Why is it that we are supposed to believe that Russia is also going to wait until we're ready, until 2027, let's say, before anything happens? A narrative that is very hard to make sense of. Now, on the sort of human absurdity front, I think my story of the year has to be the enhanced games, which I did report on earlier in the year, due to be in Las Vegas. There's basically games that sort of fall into the transhumanist slot, where the idea is that people are enhanced in some way, either through drugs or some other intervention into their body. And of course, this is billions of dollars behind it. But so far, there's, I think, only one record has actually been broken by somebody who is technically enhanced. But it just struck me as a sort of really illustrative point of where we are with regard to humanity. And then I've just got a couple of points on UK column, because I think it's been a tremendous year for UK column in terms of expansion, particularly our on-location events, which have been a massive success. And also, just three things to pick out would be the Silk and Steel podcast, 1,000 Words, and Germ Warfare. So a huge amount to look forward to in 2026. And I would say, with a certain amount of aspiration, let's say, that I hope that the spectre of digital identity will be something that draws people together in order to push back in a very, very significant way. And I think we can take heart from the debate that happened in the House of Commons just a week or so ago, and the groundswell of public response there seems to be that, which seems to unite people who are fearful of the intrusion insofar as their privacy is concerned, the civil liberties aspect, but also the idea of technical incompetence and corporate control. So that's my hope for 2026.
Thank you, Charles. Brian.
Thank you, Mike. Well, it's always interesting how the segments on UK column news seem to come together, and the preparation is largely done independently. So it's quite curious how this happens. And I say that because, as I often do, I picked up on what is being told to the general public. That often takes me to the BBC, which is still pumping out information, misinformation and disinformation. But this was a very unpleasant sort of Christmas story, because it's about Ukrainian soldiers taking their own lives. I'm not going to get into that aspect of this article, but in it was something which I found quite extraordinary, because it was talking about 45,000 Ukrainian troops being killed. So the actual statement was, while Ukraine collectively mourns the loss of more than 45,000 soldiers who have died since Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, a quieter tragedy unfolds in the shadows. And of course, this is an outrageous figure to be telling the British public, because the suffering and the scale of the deaths and the mutilation of Ukrainians is truly astonishing. But UK does not want to tell the British public what is actually happening, because this would really bring the truth and the reality and the horrors of the Ukrainian war to the fore. And surely everybody in this country would want this terrible war stopped. But if we just go in a slightly different direction, so this was a report on the National Security, within the National Security Journal. And here we've got a very different headline. Ukraine war has claimed nearly 1.4 million troop casualties. And this was a key statement that the Centre for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, their report estimates 1.4 million total military casualties in the war, Russia-Ukraine war, with Russian losses nearing 1 million, and they're claiming 250,000 Russians killed, and Ukrainian losses around 400,000, with 60 to 100,000 Ukrainians killed. Now, of course, even this report, although the figures are getting somewhere near the truth, don't ring true at the battlefield, because, of course, what's happening on the battlefield is a very intense conflict, and Russia is the country which is able to use large amounts of heavy weapons. And so the casualties would seemingly actually be with heavier casualties on the Ukrainian side. But clearly, that's not going to come across in UK and international media. Now, what else was commented upon in this article is the following, that Russia's territorial gains since early 2024 have been minimal, advancing at a glacial pace, while Russia struggles to sustain this war of attrition. So this is Russia that is outperforming both NATO, the EU, and the US combined in terms of weapons and munitions for this war, and Russia is not fully mobilized, but it's described here in this article as a pathetic effort approaching a snail's pace or a glacial pace, and that Russia is struggling. But at the same time, of course, the UK public and indeed the public in Western Europe are being told that we've really got to be very, very fearful because Russia is going to conquer the whole of Europe in weeks. Well, I've been a little bit cheeky there because, of course, the statement is that it's coming within a couple of years. But Russia can't fight on the battlefield, apparently, but all of the population of Western Europe, and I suspect the States as well, Pat, have got to be told that Russia is going to be in their bedrooms in no time at all. And I just emphasize this, that if you go looking into CSIS and you say, well, who is this organization? Surprisingly, this is the sort of people that fund it. So we've got everywhere from Bill and Melinda Gates and Carnegie down to George Soros and Open Society foundations. So I'm going to suggest that for once, even an organization funded by this type of foundation, Ford Foundation even, can get somewhere close to the truth, while the BBC is still blatantly lying to the UK public and overseas. Let's just have a little look at what Rutte had to say about the situation with Russia, and he's specifically in this little video clip commenting on Trump's efforts to bring peace.
Well, I must say what the president is doing is amazing, is crucial, and I really want to commend him for it, because he was the only one who could break the deadlock with Putin. He did. So he got the conversation going from February onwards. He was only, I think, 4 weeks in office when this all started. And I know he and his team, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and of course Marco Rubio, they are working tirelessly to get this done. And I'm trying to do everything I can, and I know also the allies here in Europe and Canada are doing everything they can to make this into a success. But it is, you always need two to tango. So it's also a big test of Putin. Whether he wants to play ball, we'll see. We'll see. I hope he will.
Do you believe that he's willing to? Because so far the Russian position really hasn't changed, especially as far as the territories are concerned.
I think this is exactly the test case. And I think what the president is doing is getting Ukraine and the US and Europe on together in NATO, so everybody involved, everybody trying to get this peace deal done, but also testing the Russians. And I really think this is the only way. And I'm thankful for the fact that he is doing that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So shocking duplicity there, because of course, what has he been doing with the European Union? Everything possible in order to destroy Trump's efforts to stop the fighting. But of course, to camera, he's talking as if he's fully on board with the peace process. So I just find this man despicable, and the duplicity, as I've said, is utterly incredible. Well, let's lighten the mood a little bit, because of course some people can see through what's happening. Let's have a look at this delightful and very Christmassy little clip, which stars, well, let's see.
Santa Claus!
So the BBC doesn't know what's going on, but of course the public do. The wider public know exactly that this is a rotten war in Ukraine, where the Ukrainian country, the people are being destroyed in total corruption across Western Europe. But maybe we'll show that again in extra time. Now, what's my take of 2026? Well, I cheated. I went and had a little look to see what other people were saying. And of course, it's pretty serious. So we've got economic collapse. We've got a 35 trillion debt bomb coming. We've got a recession and warnings of a recession. Apparently, there's a mass exit from UK because people simply can't cope with life here. We've got World War III. That's a popular one, of course, coming soon in 2026. We've got problems with Taiwan and China. China getting very upset at the latest arms supplies by the US. We've got independent commentators talking about our need to prepare for war. Sorry, that should say March 2026. So we haven't got long to get those tins of baked beans. And, well, great advice here. Move your family. The question is, where do you move them? And the UK column team come back on the fact that you're better off staying in a country and a society that you know than being overseas in a society that you don't know. But the overall message was all hell to break loose. I think I agree with that. But if we look at the reality, I think we're definitely going to see this war and rumors of war. That is going to be constant. I do not believe we're going to see a nuclear war because that is so unpredictable that not even the rules-based international order can control it. I think we're definitely going to see an increase in state misinformation and disinformation. We're going to see an increase in state fear campaigns. This is very important. They want the society fearful, very, very anxious, and therefore easier to control. This is going to lead to an increase in state censorship and dictatorship, which I think Mike and Charles Malet have already delved into in today's news. But the good news is we're going to see an increase in people seeing the reality, and this is what we need to work to increase. So the message from us at the UK column is keep calm and carry on. And of course, keep watching the UK column because we are the real people telling it as it is. And we will be doing our best to keep you sane in 2026 as we did through COVID. Patrick.
Right. Thank you very much, Brian. So what I was approaching this a little bit different. What was the biggest story of 2025? And what is the biggest story presently in front of us? A little bit of overlap with some of our previous findings here. And also what to look for in the future. It's all cheery and joyful in the future there, as Brian showed us.
My apologies. I'll get through this. This shouldn't be on screen at the moment, but we'll bring in your slide.
All good news.
A little bit of finger trouble going on in the UK column studio, but it is Christmas after all.
So that's my approach. So looking at the biggest story of 2025, I decided to take a look at the analytics on this. And so there's a few services out there that offer a snapshot into what were the biggest stories. And the biggest story in terms of the volume of coverage on the planet in 2025 was Trump and co dressing down Zelensky in the White House, if we remember that story. And so we'll bring up on screen here. This is from Onclusive. And if we go to look at what they're saying in terms of stats here, the February 28th Oval Office confrontation between J.D. Vance, Trump, and Zelensky generated 14.3 million mentions in a single day. So by far, that was the biggest story of 2025. We'll just take a little review and remind ourselves of that whole scene in Oval Office. Here it is.
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come to the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the President for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military?
We have problems.
And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, Everybody has problems, even you. But you have nice ocean, and you don't.
So the body language was quite telling, wasn't it? Zelensky was all wrapped up like that. Now, I thought that was going to be a great moment. I thought that was going to be the end of it, because didn't Trump campaign on ending this Ukraine war?
24 hours, I believe.
In 24, I thought this was the moment. This finally is a little longer than 24 hours, maybe 24 days, but good enough. But where are we now in December? We haven't moved at all. The U.S. policy in Ukraine has not changed fundamentally on the ground at all. However, we're very happy there's rapprochement, and the Russians and the Americans are talking. This is great. We're all very happy about that. But in terms of what's happening on the ground in Ukraine, very little change at all. So the can's been kicked down the road to 2026 for a negotiated settlement. So we'll see what happens. Now, in terms of the UK, Mike, just drafting off the back of what you brought up earlier here, to me, this is one of the most consequential stories in this country, and maybe further afield. We'll bring this up on screen. This is the proscription of Palestine action, labeling it as a terrorist organization, a grassroots direct action organization in the UK. This is hugely consequential, and a lot of things go with it. But at the end of the day, and we'll go just taking a look here, this is effectively an anti-war. This is an anti-war protest organization, activist organization. So to call it terrorism is pretty outrageous and completely over the top, but there's a reason why they've done that, and that is to basically quell any dissent or any criticism against Britain's policy with vis-a-vis Israel, and also supplying weapons to Israel, which, according to the International Criminal Court and the International Courts of Justice, the top court in the world, that Israel is carrying out a genocide. And that means Britain is complicit, they're facilitating and enabling, and they are a party, a co-belligerent in an active genocide, as is the United States, as is Germany, and a few other countries there in that esteemed list. So to cover all that up, the best solution would be, if you were an authoritarian state, would be to basically label all protesters and dissenters as terrorists. It's worked in the past.
Right.
So here we are. It almost reminds me, you guys, of the Emergency Powers Act of 1939, which effectively, during the Second World War, which wasn't turned the state into an authoritarian cohesive unit there. And so is that where we're at right now? I mean, we're not at war. We're told we're not at war, but yet War Powers Acts and Emergency Powers Acts seem to be coming in
Absolutely.
quite rapidly here. So just to show you how ridiculous this is one of the arrests. So the police are busy arresting pensioners, 90-year-old Holocaust survivors, blind pensioners, and the like. And they even went so far as to arrest something else, taking it to a whole nother level. Watch this.
She didn't have time to brush her hair this morning. She had better things to do, you know what I mean? Do that.
They actually did it, you guys.
Yeah. We're laughing, and we should be laughing in one way, but it's tragic.
They actually arrested and apprehended and jailed a mannequin. So, but it is a farce. Now, on a serious note, right now there's 8 hunger strikers, part of which are part of the Filton 6, original Filton 6. Now, this isn't getting enough coverage, I think, in the British media, and the British media are not also naming them per se. They're just saying the hunger strikers, those who are reporting. Some papers are, others aren't. So let me just give you an update, a review on who they are and what their status is. And this is the first, starting on the left-hand side, upper left-hand side. This is Kesa Zuhra. And she has recently been taken to the hospital. She's the first of the hunger strikers to be hospitalized there after over a month on hunger strike here. And next is Amu Gib. She is currently in the process of a hunger strike, as well as Tuta Hoxha. She's also a active hunger striker in this. Mohammed Umer Khalid, he is also on hunger strike here. And this is Louis Chiaramello. He is diabetic, so he is a partial hunger striker. He is refusing food on alternate days because of his diabetic condition, currently incarcerated here. And Kamran Ahmed, he is also one of the main 6 and Heba Muresi. She is also one of the hunger strikers there. And if we go to John Sink, actually Muhammad Umar Khalid earlier there in the upper right-hand corner, and John Sink, they have both ceased to take part in the hunger strike after 41 days, John Sink, and 13 days, Muhammad Umar Khalid, respectively. So they're no longer on hunger strike. And the gentleman who is being accused of GBH, grievous bodily harm against a female PC, Samuel Corner, 23 years old, is not on hunger strike. So they're all between 20 and 31 years of age. And the reason they're striking, and this is the important part, they're being denied due process. Palestine Action was not proscribed as a terrorist organization at the time of their arrest in 2024, but they're being held on remand. They've been separated so they can't communicate with each other. And in the case of what Jeremy Corbyn brought up to Parliament is that they're being denied, basic provisions, and being singled out and being treated badly and even insulted by some of the prison guards because of who they are. And so that's a serious violation of their rights. And I think it's very brave what they're doing, in terms of activism. These people are really putting their lives on the line for principles, like jury trials, for instance, basic things like that. Those are all wrapped up in this issue. Because as you know, as we've reported, they're using the Palestine Action issue to fast track arrests without jury. They did during the last round of hearings. So it's a test case for having no juries. So this is a really important issue. And so in terms of the present day, so many issues and so many things with our basic rights and society are wrapped up into this story. This is why it's important. Whether you support the Palestinian cause or the Israeli cause, to me, shouldn't matter. What matters is the principles and the precedents and the rights and the jurisprudence that's being tested around this story.
Yeah, very sad.
So in terms of the future, looking ahead, I mean, this is echoing Brian's mood board of doom, which we just watched earlier there. Everyone's asking, this is Project Syndicate, a very staunch globalist publication. Will 2026 bring financial crisis? And if it does, it's going to be because of this. The dollar is a smoldering heap of worthless fiat refuse, quickly becoming because of, mainly the policies of the United States in terms of weaponizing the dollar. It's driving people out of the dollar. It's empowering BRICS, and it's probably going to create cohesive solidarity in South America with the latest war on Venezuela. So that's what could happen in 2026. That's one of the big stories that we're looking at. But so much to cover, you guys. I mean, we didn't talk about Venezuela and the late breaking stuff. Israel, Iran. What we witnessed over the summer was historic and unprecedented. I mean, this year has just been chock-a-block.
We can say, though, look after your families, look after your finances, stay with cash, do some simple things.
Okay, well, look, we just want to say thank you very much to everyone who has supported the UK column this year in whatever capacity, because without you, we cannot do any of this. Keep an eye on what's going on the front page of the UK Column website. It's ukcolumn.org if you're not aware of that. There's new stuff going on there on a regular basis. If you would like to support us in 2026, the button to do so is right there on the front page. That'll take you to a page that'll show you how you can help us. But, whether you can support us financially or not, please do share material that you see or stuff that we put out, because that is what helps us beat the censorship regime that we've been talking about in a certain sense in this program, but we're going to see much more of next year. Now, just one program this evening, the last day of term and all that, and that is the Christmas banter with Charles, myself, and Germ. And Charles, I love the jumper.
That is camouflage, actually. Christmas camouflage.
Oh, it's Christmas camouflage, is it? Right. Okay. No comment from Charles. Okay. And look, while we're off, I want to make sure that everybody knows that 1 p.m. Most days we're putting out some material, including the presentations from the Cheltenham On Location event earlier in the year. So Catherine Gunn, Alex, Raja Mia, Brian, and Patrick will all their presentations will be going out over the Christmas New Year period. So keep an eye on the front page of the website to see which one of those is the next to come up, and do watch them if you haven't seen them already. Ben, let me welcome you to the program, and tell us what your key story from this year has been.
Thanks, Mike. Isn't it wonderful and festive? I'm very jealous of your fire in the background there. And I'm wondering if we're going to have a musical interlude at some point where Patrick's going to break out into I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas or something. It's got that kind of feel to it, very, very kind of 1960s. So what am I going to talk about? The destruction of the nation-state system and its replacement with a neo-imperial communitarian nightmare, basically, which we talk about a lot. And the fact that the UK, England in particular, is a hub for this, and this is being run by our own government. I spoke earlier on in the year, back in June, about this organisation. It's called MakeSpace Oxford, and they are focused on what they call dark matter, the deeply rooted legal, theological, philosophical, and ethical codes that underpin our society and basically make it what it is. And they are attempting to change those, to rewrite them. And they have this theory of change, which I showed previously, which is about what they call attacking deep-rooted problems. It's just slightly covered up in the top left there. Our logo's got in the way, but you can see deep-rooted problems, and it's the stuff beneath the surface. You can see there's a little factory building, which is actually a physical location. This isn't just a picture. This is a map of something that they've actually they've built. They've commandeered an old industrial unit, and they've turned it into a space that they're using to incubate and propagate this new system out into the world. And you can see there underneath what they view as problems are things like contract law, values, belief systems, the fundamentals of what goes into our society. And they want to change them. They want to unlock a new reality. They've built this, what they call a demonstrator hub, where those underlying codes are being rewritten. It is a physical location, but it's also a dream space. You see there hovering above it, where they have imagination infrastructure. They're focused on building a new economy based on decolonial futures. So this is all kind of neo-Marxist ideology, and they have solidarity networks all around the town, around the county. This is being spread out through various different hubs and labs and programs with local education system and other parts of the of government around Oxfordshire, and it runs right up to the county level. And actually beyond that, to a national level, they want Oxfordshire to be an exemplar. The county is sitting right at the nexus of how this new global system is being developed and implemented, not just here, but all around the world. And they view themselves as having the right and the responsibility ultimately to project influence up to a national level and then up to a global level. But then importantly, if we can just get that back, that comes back down to them too, right? Because this isn't a organic uprising of the local people in Oxfordshire wanting to change things for the better. This is actually them being aligned to a global agenda that's being handed down from the UN and the World Economic Forum and places like that, right? Now, who's behind this? Again, I'm representing stuff we've shown previously, but it's just worth recapping that this is backed by what is essentially, and these are just a few examples. We've got a city-based debt charity, so a lot of finance people. You've got the National Lottery Fund in there, so this is poor people paying for their own replacement, basically. It's what the National Lottery is up to. It's probably why it was set up in the first place, to be honest. You've got Enterprise Oxfordshire, which is an inward investment and global expansion program and wants to make Oxford and Oxfordshire one of the top 3 innovation hubs internationally. This is all aligned to the World Economic Forum Build Back Better agenda. There's a slug of money in there from the Getting Building Fund, which was a £900 million government fund, part of the COVID legacy from 2020. And this is all being controlled and overseen by HM government and actually run almost directly out of the civil service. This lady, Ashufta Alam, was the chair of Make Space Oxford, while also being deputy director in the civil service, working in the in BEES, the Department of Industry, and she, within that role, oversees the use of £2.5 billion of international climate investment, so huge amount of public money being used to stimulate economic activity that is aligned to this agenda in countries around the world. And ultimately, she's applying that same international development methodology to the UK. So the UK has, for a long time now, but we're really beginning to see what this feels and looks like, been reduced to essentially a colony in the same way that the other colonies were back in the days of the empire. We've been reduced to that level, and there is now this global technocratic system completely detached from the nation state, ultimately, that is imposing its will down onto us through organizations like this, through the work of ladies and gentlemen as well, but people like the Ashufta Alam. Now, interestingly, the day that I did the first report, June the 6th, she resigned. I don't know if that was a direct consequence of me reporting on it, but it was quite a coincidence. So, on that basis, that was quite a good thing. But my prediction for next year is that this stuff is going to continue and expand and accelerate, right? Because this is the mechanism through which the great transition, the great reset, the global migration onto this new platform, technological, ideological platform, is happening right now on a daily basis all around the UK. And MakeSpace is one very good example of how this is playing out. But there's a bunch of other organizations, not least this one. This is the mycelial network. And mycelial is the root-like structure of a fungus. So these kind of exist under the surface in the forest. They tie the ecosystem together, connecting the different organisms. They share nutrients around the ecosystem, and they're submerged under the ground, beneath the surface, like this dark matter. And they present themselves, mycelial network, as community asset developers, and they say they safeguard public assets. And this is on I think it's on the homepage or one of the main pages of their website, which I think is quite telling, actually. So you can see here that they want to buy up unused buildings for public ownership. Well, they've got a church. So this church is empty. What about the young people? You can see on the bottom right there. What about the young people? Young people, we need bats. So what they're saying is the churches are empty. But we've got to not just fill. We're not going to fill the churches. We've actually got to take public ownership of them and turn them into communitarian hubs for this new godless globalist system. Basically, that's what they're up to. And they're doing it one building at a time, one neighborhood at a time. So this is very much in line with the kind of Fabian war of attrition, incremental steps in order to implement the agenda. The whole thing is marinated in these kinds of ideas around reframing and collective conscience and activism, and basically demonstrating the inevitability of what they're doing. So it's all narrative, it's all stories in order to bring through the crushing, grinding, technological new paradigm that is actually going to make this thing possible. And they're all around the UK. So there's 30 of these things in these network. There's a bunch of this sort of happy, smiley, lovely people in Newcastle, Manchester, Wolverhampton, Bristol. Obviously, they're in Bristol, the People's Republic of Bristol. Plymouth, we've got one in Plymouth. There's definitely one in Totnes. Totnes is a transition town, has been for about, I think, thick end of 20 years now. So this is, an ongoing program. And you can see at the bottom there that this is backed by the Joseph Rowntree Trust, who are, charitable foundation that are absolutely in the mix across this whole space. And then a couple of other organizations, Platform Places, which we'll talk about more next year. This ecosystem is absolutely huge. And importantly, Power to Change. And there's a bunch of people from Power to Change who are working directly they're now working for the Labour government as members of Keir Starmer's office, right? So this is absolutely hand in glove with the Labour change agenda, the Fabian movement. It's spreading, as I've said, across the whole of the UK it's a total violation of British history and culture. And the solution, I think, is actually not to attack these people, because we will fall into the trap of being awful, aggressive, far-right nasties that have to be censored and shut up and locked down. We actually need to approach them in a very open and constructive way and provide an alternative and explain why our system, when it's run properly, is actually much better than the one that they're trying to replace it with.
Ben, just remind me, what is it, if you're growing mushrooms, what is it you put on them? What do you feed them with?
I'll say manure.
Yes.
And you keep them in the dark, right? It's the mushroom treatment.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you for that. And I mean, just very briefly, a look into the future of next year. I mean, aside from more of this type of thing, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I kind of just landed on at the end there, right? I think the future next year, and this is not some prediction about how awful it's going to be and all the terrible things that are coming towards us and may or may not happen. It's like, actually, we can get our hands around this, because those people, actually, most of them are really good people. Yeah, I genuinely believe that. And they've been pulled into this thing because the powers that be are very good at manipulating people's emotions and their compassion and their empathy. And actually, we need to demonstrate to these people that, yeah, we're good people too. And we're not scary and terrifying. And actually, most of the time we want most of the same things, broadly speaking. And I think that's my prediction for 2026, is that we begin to build some bridges.
Thank you. That's very good. Thank you for that. Sandi, let's come on to you next then. And I think farming is the topic.
It is. Well, as you know, we're approaching Christmas, and it's a time when food and family and gratitude come to the forefront. And I think one of my important messages this year has always been to support the farmers, because with food security and the people who make the food possible, it's so important, and it is our farmers, and they are really having a lot of challenges at the moment, as we know. And across Europe this week, farmers took to the streets in Brussels, and they were really put under a lot of pressure by the powers that be, with legislation, taxes, and so-called environmental rules. And this is what I've got a clip here of what happened to the farmers this week in France, and how they were escaping blockades. And this is something that's happening worldwide, the attack on farmers. And this guy just managed to completely baffle the police by getting past this blockade. And the farmers are desperate at the moment, because they are coming under such attack. And they're being driven out of business by policies linked to Agenda 2030, the UN Sustainable Development Goal 2, end hunger. Yet the lived reality of this, look at this poor man being really manhandled. And this is all about Agenda 2030 policy, goal to end hunger. But the thing is that the lived reality is that when you overregulate, overtax, and criminalize food production, you don't get hunger, you get the opposite. And this is what Agenda 2030 is all about. It's all about the inversion of the truth. Unfortunately, my prediction is that this is going to get quite bad, with the farmers in Europe and in the UK. It will come here. And what we've got to realize is that they're at the front line of our food system. Without them, there's no food security, no resilience, no sovereignty. And more importantly, they hold the power. Farmers do hold a lot of power, because when food production stops, everything stops. And what we're seeing in Europe is coming to the UK, and the same policies, the same language, the same pressure. And if farmers fall, the public falls with them, unfortunately. Now, this Christmas, the farmers have been, the UK farmers have been going out and raising money for charity, for children's charities, to bring presents to children in hospitals. And this is the Bristol farmers, the Southwest farmers on a convoy. No matter what pressure they're under, they're still going out, raising money for charities to help children at Christmas in hospitals and hospices. And I just think that they are doing such a good job. And this is, at the moment, we're not encountering what's happening in Europe, but this will happen. And it's so important that we give thanks to the farmers for their hard work. We need to buy British. We need to buy directly from the farmers at this time. And we need to give thanks to the food on our tables. We all need to defend and support those who provide it and make Christmas possible. So I just think that my hope for, what was my hope for 2026 is that we manage to overturn a lot of this stuff that's being thrown at us, the digital ID, the assisted dying, the abortion bills, all of the things that we're at the moment, everything is on the front line. We're there and with the farmers, and that we manage to somehow pull it all together. And we are England. We always come through in the end. I do believe that this is something that if we all hold together and we support our farmers, we'll be able to get through. And I think, where the whole war machine as well. I mean, years ago, we had John Lennon singing "Give Peace a Chance." We have to remember that and be able to give peace a chance, Where are all the peace protesters? They're being arrested. That's where they are. We still need to keep going. And as Brian said, keep calm, carry on, keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandi. Before we move to Mark, Charles, have you got anything you wanted to add to that?
Just a little. Sandi's absolutely right. And I think what is underestimated by the public at large, especially those who've begun to consider this, is the impact they can have by just engaging, even on a small scale locally. And even if you're in an urban area, there will be farmers markets. There will be relationships that you can build. So if you're not in a position to be able to grow your own food, provide your own food, look after your own livestock, whatever, there are definitely other options. And the mutual benefit in doing so, I think, is absolutely tremendous. But it has to start somewhere. So I think Sandi's absolutely right. But the way to do that is the direct approach, because that cuts out the corporations and it cuts out the state.
Thank you, Charles. Thanks. Mark, I think you're going to take a look at what's been going on health-wise at the moment.
Yeah, this is really important because it will provide a potential victory for many nations, the UK, the US, and beyond. We know there's the 2026 World Health Assembly coming up in Geneva in May. And the powers that be, through the power center or the ring of power, to use a Tolkien metaphor, there's a lot of focus on big pharma, and that's where a lot of power has been exerted. That's one of the great dark forces of our time. And the fact that they didn't fully pull off their plandemic, scandemic to an absolute full sustained lockdown means that we had something of a victory 4 or 5 years ago when the first pandemic came around. Well, that provides the precedent for even greater victories. If we keep our eye on this issue, which I've attempted to do very steadily in latter 24 through 2025 and now into 2026. So if you look at the money power as the central ring of power, there's the associated rings of power, the big media cartel, and big pharma has really emerged, as I said, as a menacing force. But the people of the UK and the US have stared this thing down, and we've raised a lot of doubt, a lot more education, a lot more information about big pharma, about vaccines, about the whole 9 yards. We saw some of this come out at the recent York get-together that the UK column just had, that I was so happy to attend and had such a warm welcome. That was a wonderful thing for me in 2025. But now I'm going to be focusing on certain aspects of this. You might recall in August of 2024, guys and ladies, that there was a Tristan Franklin, a young cross-country track runner in the Nashville, Tennessee area, that just mysteriously dropped dead one day when he was running. Well, you might say, maybe that was a fluke, something in his health history or some birth defect. Maybe we could say that that's not related to vaccines. But then there were 2 or more cross-country runners that also died right on the spot as they were running during their athletic activities. So now in that Nashville, Tennessee area, there's a major issue there, kind of a tripwire. And I've been making occasional calls and emails, and I'm not getting any responses so far. But I'm going to really up the ante in 2026, because if it could come out, if it's true, and it appears to be promising to be true, if it could be shown that those cross-country runners, all in the prime of their lives, died of the COVID vax, that would have a major breaking open kind of effect. It would have, I think, an irreversible effect on really showing just how dangerous these vaccines can be, especially COVID. So I'm going to be really following that issue, really pressing hard to see if I can get a certain doctor to go on record. So far, I'm detecting some hesitancy, although I probably could have tried to contact her more often than I did. But nevertheless, I have made an ample effort. We'll see how that goes. But what it comes down to is that the potential for this issue to not only stop the pandemic treaty from taking full effect, but the greater effect internationally to put Big Pharma way back on its heels and delegitimize what they're doing even more. The potential is so great that the cause of freedom could take a very major step forward. So I'm not exactly making a pinpoint prediction, but the potential here for the cause of freedom for Big Pharma to be seen for what it truly is, for the vaccine regimen, this enormous explosion of vaccines in recent decades, even for newborn children or infants and toddlers, just a multiplicity of jabs that they probably don't need. That whole apparatus could come under much more scrutiny due to the effect of people pushing back on the first pandemic, knowing a lot more from that, having learned from that. Now they can look at the next World Health Assembly and say no. James Roguski is picking up his efforts along with what I'm doing. So this shows a lot of promise here for freedom. Later in 2025, although I didn't exactly break the story, I kind of reinvigorated Exercise Pegasus in the UK as they're doing dry runs and drills to kind of prepare for the next pandemic. And we've been told about bird flu and Mpox and all these things that could potentially constitute the next pandemic. So we're getting the signals. We're seeing what's coming over the hill, what's coming over the horizon. The question is are we prepared to take the fight even further? We've partially won it already. We can win all the way. And I want to make sure I contribute to that process. And I think that that's probably sufficient for my statement today.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Diane, Fornethy is probably a big story as far as what's been going on in the north is concerned, but just give us a brief reminder of what that's about for anybody that hasn't been following us all the way through this year.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Mike. And Merry Christmas and Happy Winter Solstice to everybody out there. As the Northern correspondent, and I'm actually I'm a bit tired today because I just came up to the Northeast last night after spending a wonderful few days in Plymouth down in the studio, even though it was a little bit dark and rainy and I couldn't really see the lighthouse much at all, but it was great to be down there. And part of what we were doing when I was down there was working with Brian to cover more of this Fornethy Residential School case. And I just want to say that Fornethy Residential School, which was under the Education Committee of Glasgow Corporation and then Strathclyde Regional Council from 1960 to 1991, we've reported on this extensively, and I want to kind of review this and see where it's going to go from here. Just as a reminder, it was a school. It was not a holiday camp. It was not for convalescents. It was not for respite care, even though to this day, the mainstream media, when they do come in and try to cover this case, continue to repeat this over and over again, these absolute lies about how it was set up and what they were there for. The UK column has been working with the Fornethy residential schools abuse survivors since 2022. We've been doing this the whole way through, and we will not stop. And the reason that we're not going to stop is because I'm telling you, these brave women from Glasgow are not going to stop either. And this is what we really need to be thinking about as we go forward, I think, for everyone in this country and everywhere. This year for UK Column, Brian has recorded individual interviews with some of these survivors who have been leading the effort, including gutsy women such as Sharon Cruden and Lynn Sheeran. We've been doing updates on the progress of the petition that has been going through the Petitions Committee in Scottish Parliament. This has been going through since 2022. So as I said, this is an ongoing battle. This is called Allow the Fornethy Survivors to Access Scotland's Redress Scheme. There has been unanimous agreement in the Petitions Committee about the fact that this needs to be supported because it's not fair, since they've been saying that, the Petitions Committee says, well, they shouldn't not be able to access redress, which is this sort of compensation scheme in Scotland for historic child abuse survivors, just because they were abused short term or they were in a certain type of school. So, of course, this is unjust. And I do have to say that UK Column's evidence throughout time supported this through the Petitions Committee, and it ultimately resulted in a floor debate in June, which may not sound like a big deal, but it actually is, considering the extent and the severity of the case and the number of people that have been involved in this. Also, as part of 2025, as part of all of our work that has been done by several of us over the last few years, we entered the American mainstream news for the first time ever, which is a big deal for all of us. And I think in some cases, mainstream okay, but it hasn't always necessarily been positive. But they contacted us because they saw all of the evidence and reporting that we've been doing for Fornethy for the past few years. And I spoke with a man called Alan Walzer, who's in Tampa Bay in Florida. And he contacted me because one of the Fornethy survivors who gave evidence and testified in the trial, her name is Allie Flanagan. She contacted this Mainstream, which is an ABC affiliate in Florida. And basically, we got connected through all of the work that we've been doing, and also thanks to Lynn Sheeran, who's one of the Fornethy leaders. And this has been a really, really important thing for us. Their coverage was not perfect at all of the situation and the trial, but it is really important to say that we did lead them in the right direction in terms of looking at all of the complexities that are involved in the trial and the 31 years of abuse that girls from Glasgow went through at Fornethy. But I think it's a perfect example of what can be done if you don't stop and you keep going, because these women have been through a lot. They were abused between the ages of 5 and 12, taken away sometimes to Fornethy, way far away from Glasgow, more than one time, for 6 to 8 weeks at one time. And even though the result of this trial has not been perfect, the message here is that you keep going, and they will still plan to continue to keep going in 2026 and beyond. Now, the case I'm talking about that has just concluded is a criminal case of Patricia Baxter or Robertson, one of many people that were involved in the abuse at Fornethy for over 30 years, but also part of an entire system of historical institutional child abuse. Not only at Fornethy, of course, as we know, but at schools across the UK for many decades. And I think it's important to note that even though there's a lot of focus in the mainstream on the Asian grooming gang, so to speak, there are people from this country that have been involved in child abuse for a very long time, institutionally speaking. We only have to mention Debbie Savile's name one time, but there are many others at the top of the establishment that have been involved in abusing children in all ways possible for a very long time. So I attended 2 days of Patricia Robertson's trial. One was in October. I went up to the High Court in Glasgow, where there were witnesses that day. It was former staff that were sort of talking about what they saw and what they remembered, not Patricia Robertson herself, but others that they were able to find. One of the really disturbing things about it was that the solicitors on the women's side were trying to manipulate these witnesses to make these women out into these feral creatures who needed to be deloused, and they couldn't use cutlery, and they had to learn how to be basic people in civilization, which wasn't true. So that was all very stressful for the women. And then the 3rd of December, I went back up again to attend the sentencing hearing. And disgustingly, Patricia Robertson was only given a fine to pay £1,000 each to the 18 women who testified, who was found guilty of those particular charges of cruel and unnatural treatment, and 3 years probation. Remembering that she is 77 years old and she was not given jail time because this was her first offense. So she will not be serving any jail time. And this was obviously very shocking to all of us. The full statement from Judge Lord Krolbeck, who made the decision and the sentencing, is going to be available as a link in the show notes. So this past week, when I was down in Plymouth, Brian and I had some discussion ourselves, which will be coming out next year on UK Column, as well as interviewing several of the women who have been working with us this whole time and wanted to share their thoughts on what happened. And all I can say is that they're not going to be stopping anytime soon. They are understandably angry, but they are motivated to continue. And as I said, we will be there to support them and continue to report as much as we can. So what does this mean? This is one case of institutional child abuse where these women have not stopped for years. They don't intend to stop. So anyone who says, oh, there's nothing we can do, the agenda is winning, I want to make sure that my message today is that we can do something. And even if we don't think it makes a difference, we still have to do it and get out there. And I want to give a few other examples of things that I have been experiencing here that I've reported on that I know that it's happening up here in the North, because I know that it's a very active place up here when it comes to doing what we can do to stand our ground. For example, these are small things. My stand in the park in the town where I live now here in the Northeast still meets every week, regardless of how cold or rainy it is. We're still out there in the park, and we put our yellow stand in the park plague in the ground, and we drink coffee, and sometimes we freeze, and sometimes we're soaking wet, but we're still out there. There are plenty of local events that anyone, anywhere can go to, so go support local events. For example, there's been a Magna Carta in the North exhibition at Durham Cathedral that I reported on, classical music concerts, so protecting the culture of this country. If we stop going to attend events and support them and enjoy them, they will stop, and that's going to contribute to that global effort that they want to put upon us. But to protect British culture, we have to participate and support them and pay the artists and all of the people that are doing these things. I attended the Walsingham Country Show, local farmers selling things, local crafts, local suppliers, things like that we need to be doing, because then we are supporting, as Sandi said, supporting our local farmers and things that are still being produced in Britain, which is something that we can all do. My local group here called We the People Northeast, which has a Rumble channel, they have worked with me on filming migrant protests, so-called, in Newcastle, council meetings here in County Durham. They now have a new video that they've put up just this week about what's going on with delivery drivers and potential things related to the idea that they're hiring people who may or may not be here legally. And so there's a lot of questions around that. But they went and just talked to these drivers out in Newcastle and Sunderland and the surrounding areas in the Northeast. I interviewed Ted Coulter, who was one of our more successful interviews this year. He is, as I called him, an ordinary man who extraordinarily questioned the COVID injections. That was a really, really inspiring interview. Just, banners on boards, hosting talks up here with people such as Mark Devlin. So just getting together in the pub, hearing a speaker, sharing ideas, just being together as a community. The farmers up here in the North have a group called the Forgotten Lands, which kind of stretches across the A69, sort of between Newcastle and Carlisle. So they want to make sure that their needs are being met. There's been several rallies around digital ID, fighting Agenda 2030, getting out light papers, getting out the Agenda 2030 information created by the light paper. And also Cumbria Action is one example of many local groups. And one of the first interviews that will be streamed in 2026 was my interview that I recorded with Chris and Brent from Cumbria Action, who are just two guys who just, especially Chris, who just said he was tired of seeing how things were going, started a Facebook group, and now it has several thousand members. So again, as Sandi said, we have to keep going. And I want to say, and I say this to everyone, and I want to leave everyone with a bit of hope here, we have to love each other. We have to give each other a hug. We have to protect what we have in this country and keep it precious. And if we don't continue to engage in it and support it and be involved in it, it's going to go away, potentially. But we have to get out there and do what we can, even if it means going to a concert you enjoy that has, British artists that are involved. We have to protect our children and their innocence. We have to protect our freedoms here in the UK and throughout the West. And I just want to ask our audience today, we are doing everything that we can at UK Column to get the information out there. But I really hope that you are all with us and that you will continue to support all the important work that we try to do every single day here at UK Column. So happy winter solstice and Merry Christmas to everyone, and Happy New Year when it comes. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Brian, any?
Well, I think it's absolutely the right note to end on, that it's so important that people don't just withdraw because the news and all the prognosis for the new year is so bad. We've got to be fighting it at every level. And as we have said many, many times, action conquers fear. Doing quite simple things can change your whole feeling and demeanor from being sort of oppressed to feeling that you're actually achieving things. And it is absolutely true that very small actions can magnify and grow into something much bigger and more special. So it's beholden on all of us to be doing something, even if that's only a little, and even if you're restricted because of circumstance or personal circumstance or finances. If you can only do a little bit, do something.
You got any closing thoughts?
That's a fabulous note to end on. I can't really add anything to.
Okay, well, look, I just want to say thank you once again to everybody that's watching this program, has been watching the UK column all year. I want to say thank you, of course, to all the participants on the news program. Patrick and Mark and Diane and Ben and Sandi and so on, and Charles, of course. You've got a couple of cards you want to show just before we go?
Well, more than a couple. We can't possibly go through them all. So I'm dropping some. Apologies for that. Is that actually up on camera? Should be, yeah. So we've got a lot of cards from people that have come in. Often they've come in with a letter as well. Quite often that's a letter just thanking the UK column team for what we're doing. But often it's a letter with information about something that the individual who's written the card or the family are doing. And these are a huge boost for us because they're personal, they're handwritten, they're human, and they really do tell us that we've got a lot of support out there from across the world. And people think enough of us to send in all these wonderful Christmas cards. I would just say some of them have also contained donations. So thank you to the people that have done that. And out of all of them, the fun one, they're all great, but the fun one was for one that popped up from Hawaii. So I don't think we've ever had a communication from Hawaii before, but there we were on the small, isolated and lovely island. And I'm going to add to that we do also get gifts sent in. So these are some wonderful coasters. It says "Why I Bonnie Lad" on it. Utterly brilliant. Don't know whether you've seen one of those, Patrick, before. Somebody some time ago sent in this, which I'm sure if I hold it up against Mike's shirt, I think it'll show. So we've got a model of Smeaton's Tower, the lighthouse. And the bit that I wanted to end on was that a lady, Elizabeth, sent us this newspaper. Now, the significance of this, apart from anything else, it's 4 pages. But the key thing is it's dated 1926, Wednesday, May the 12th, 1926. It's the Daily Mirror, and it originally cost 1 penny. And the big headline and theme of this newspaper is all about the general strike that was taking place. And so this is a little newspaper which is all about trouble and strife and mayhem in the country. The government very upset that those nasty workers were pushing back. Some terrible people got very upset in one location and stoned the police. Who could think of such a thing? And what it shows us is that the country was going through bad times then. But of course, as grim as it seemed at the time, everybody got through it. And I think maybe that's a good reflection for us at the end of 2025. But the thing that really caught my attention were the 4 pages, because essentially that's where the UK column newspaper started many years ago. So Daily Mirror, 1 penny here in 1926. UK column still here in January 2026 for our 20-year celebration. So maybe we've achieved something akin to this little newspaper, but we could only do it with your fantastic help. And we really do appreciate the generosity and kindness of everybody, wherever you are, UK, worldwide, who've had the heart to actually donate or become a member of UK Column. Because as Mike has said, we are only here after all this time because of the generosity of people who actually help fund us. So if you listen in UK or overseas and you're not yet on board, have a think about joining us in that way, becoming a member in 2026, because we'd like more members so that we can grow and expand the news coverage and also get more reports from on the streets, because that's something which does take up a lot of time and effort and often involves travel and accommodation, etc. So if you support us by watching, think about making a donation or taking out a membership, because in 2026 the life is going to get tough, and UK Column will be here with you, I hope, shining a light as to what's happening and where we need to go.
So thank you very much, everybody. Have a great Christmas, great New Year. Remember, 1 p.m. Every weekday next week, and the week after there'll be something going out. We're not going to put anything out on Christmas Day or Boxing Day, but every other day there'll be something going out, including the Cheltenham presentations. So do join at 1 p.m. for those. We'll see you for the next news program on January the 5th, 1 p.m. as usual. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.